Hi, good morning, everybody. How are you? Thank you very much for joining me once again for the James Anderson webinar. Now, firstly, thank you to those that sent in some questions to me following our last webinar. I really appreciate all the questions. Now, there was one particular subject, actually, that came up a number of times, and the first person to mention it was Basil. So thank you, Basil. Again, really good question that you asked, and I think it's important for everybody to know about this. And it also came up a couple of other times in your queries and questions in general. So thank you, everybody. Now, that subject was the regulation of estate agents. You know, some of the questions asked were, you know, how do we know who's qualified? What are the regulations? Who are the people within the business as well? So really, you know, important questions to ask, not only us at James Anderson, but, you know, any agent, because for me personally, regulation is a really important factor, and we do work hard with our staff to make sure they're all trained properly, that they can deliver a good service, and that there's a standardization of service throughout the company, whether you're dealing with the guys on the front offices, property management, or accounts, whatever it might be. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll share my screen with you guys, so one moment. Okay, so here we go. So the regulation of property agents. Now, firstly, let me just give you a general sort of overview. So on the 12th of October 2018, Heather Wheeler, Member of Parliament, she's the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, she set up a RoPA, the Regulation of Property Agents Working Group. The reason for this is there was a call for the government to show evidence on protecting consumers in the letting and managing agent market, and improving the home buying and selling process. Lord Best was appointed as the chair. And then this year, bringing things forward a couple of years, I think it was Thursday, the 18th of July, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, known as MHCLG, released a report of the recommendations of the RoPA Working Group. Now, we're members of ALA Property Mark and NAEA Property Mark, who are bodies within the industry that do have a qualification system, of which, you know, I've taken exams, the vast majority of our team have taken exams, and we are qualified. So ALA, amongst other bodies, were part of a small group of, I guess, industry stakeholders, which examined several key industry issues, including regulation and qualification. And for a while now, a lot of industry bodies have been calling for government regulation to ensure that everyone in the industry is licensed and that they adhere to a strict code of practice and holds at least what they call a level 3 qualification. Now, this is the equivalent of an A level in the world of academia. So it offers huge potential, really, for the professionalisation of the sector and to stamp out bad practice. The working group has proposed a new regulatory framework to cover agents in the UK and letting and managing agents in England only. It's important to be aware that the private rented sector is a devolved issue that the Welsh and Scottish governments have already introduced legislation to regulate letting agents in those countries. Coming forward a bit more, on, I think it was the 20th or 22nd of July, an overarching code of practice draft document was made available by the RoPA Group for industry comment, and that's going to be open until the 4th of September this year. So the industry has a chance to take a look and make any comments on the areas that they are proposing. Really, I think it's an industry view in the main, and certainly my view, that it's really important and vital that consumers have confidence in their agent, and that agent is providing them with the right information and dealing with their transaction correctly. So really, I honestly think this is welcome news for the industry and for consumers. So Here's a little bit of information. Here are the links to the documents that I've mentioned and will be mentioning today. The RoPA Working Group document that we just mentioned, and Protecting Consumers in the Letting and Managing Agent Market from 2017 and updated in 2018. So what's the current situation then? Well, there is no overarching statutory regulation of private sector lettings or managing agents in England, nor is there any legal requirement for them to belong to a trade association. However, many letting and managing agents do submit to voluntary regulation, as we have. And I think if you're a decent agent and you're committed to your business, then I hope it should be a standardisation, which this is all working towards. So yeah, at the moment there's no regulation in England. So we briefly mentioned it earlier, other things that are happening in and around us. Scotland has got a registration scheme for letting and managing agents. In Wales, requires agents to be licensed, and landlords, I believe, as well. In Northern Ireland, in 2017, the Department for Communities announced an intention to introduce a regulatory framework for all letting agents, including bringing forward legislation to ban letting agent fees. And we all know about the tenant fee ban that's taken place in England. But there we are, confirming once again, in England, there's no regulation just yet. So effectively, what that means, I suppose, is that, it's almost like a two-tier industry. There are those that are qualified and committed to the business and their trade and their careers, and there are those that are not, who may not take the same approach as those who are qualified. So it's always something to think about and something to ask when you are working with an agent, because who would you rather work with? I know if it was me and I was on the other side of the computer and I was a landlord, I know what I would want to do. And in terms of, two differing agents, those that are qualified and those that are not, trying to charge the same fee, surely there's better value with the qualified agent. So the RoPA Working Group had some aims and goals, which really they wanted to set out from day one. So let's have a look at those. So what they wanted to do was create a model for an independent property agent regulator, including how it will operate and how it will enforce compliance. Secondly, a single mandatory and legally enforceable code of practice for property agents is required. Thirdly, a system of minimum entry requirements and continuing professional development for property agents. They wanted to explore fees, charges, and ability to choose a managing agent for leaseholders and freeholders. So essentially, really summarising that, they want one rule for all in order to carry out business effectively and safely. So why did the working group want to recommend licensing? I mean, there's a number of reasons, and I think the vast majority of professional agents would agree that bad practice is definitely detrimental to consumers, to agents, and to the reputation of the whole sector. The working group has explored a variety of models of regulation, considering a wider context of different professional infrastructure and the financial and emotional consequences of bad practice within the residential property industry. Licensing would facilitate a structure of regulation, including adherence to a code of practice, and actually a fit and proper persons test for directors of companies, and a register of agency licenses available to consumers. Therefore, it's totally transparent. You can check up on your agent and see if they are actually licensed and they are what they say they are. In turn, we hope that this will then drive up standards of service provided to consumers. Again, coming back to bodies like Property Mark, who, along with other bodies, argued over the years that piecemeal regulation doesn't work. And speaking from experience, and if you speak to a lot of letting agents, sometimes it does feel like that. There's bits and pieces of legislation that come through and you've got to then change your working practices and get in line with that and be compliant. And gosh, it would be lovely just to have a defined set of rules that we could work to. That would be great. You know, some sort of coherent, overarching framework of regulation, you know, to create a level playing field and remove that kind of two-tier market that I said sort of exists at the moment. So who are RoPA? I know we said that Heather Wheeler set this up. Lord Best is the chair. But who are some of these industry bodies that I've mentioned, you know, stakeholders in the industry? So let's have a look. Of course, ARLA and NAEA, and ARLA is the Association of Residential Letting Agents, of course. You've got the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, national trading standards as well in there. There's citizens advice, ombudsman services. So there's some of the sort of, you know, major players in the industry contributing their ideas and coming up with something that we hope is going to be a rule that works for everybody. In addition to this, it will need to be regulated, as we've said. So, it will be the case of a new independent regulator being appointed through a fair and open competition process, of course, and they'd be accountable via a board to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. The regulator would be required to report annually on its progress in raising standards, and that will be done through key performance indicators, which will be a fantastic thing to actually see that this is making a difference in the industry, which I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. So part of this, there's obviously an argument of, look, should it be the individual that is qualified, or should it be the actual agency that they work for? And actually, it's probably a little bit of both, to be honest. So some of the working group findings, they've said that while firms can be held responsible for the competence and training of their staff, individuals are the only ones that can hold qualifications. In addition to that, in addition to individuals needing to hold qualifications, it will bring them into line with other regulated professions. You know, when you think about maybe lawyers, for example, a lawyer that mismanages confidential information, let's say, their status means that they cannot leave that particular practice and move on to another one without taking personal responsibility and consequence for malpractice. Of course, there's other strands of consumer protection that individual members of staff can't be responsible for, such as, you know, including client money protection belonging to one of those schemes. And this is something that we've discussed in previous webinars, and how important that is. And also things like an effective complaints procedure. That's not the responsibility of the individual, but certainly of the agency. So while I guess these qualifications that are proposed shouldn't burden the individual with excessive cost or time commitment, what people do need to do is demonstrate sufficiently that that individual has a commitment to the profession. There is a general thought amongst, you know, the RoPA group that customer-facing agents should be able to demonstrate the knowledge and the skills equivalent to a level 3 qualification, like we mentioned earlier, and that's the A-level standard. Whilst company directors actively involved in the business should achieve a level 4 qualification. Now, that is the same level as an HNC, a higher national certificate. So really, the qualifications are being viewed as a foundation or a bedrock of raising professional standards and consumer confidence. So there are existing codes of practice at the moment, as we've mentioned. So, you know, should agents be signing up to those? Well, if you're not already, then really what the working group is saying is that, look, we've looked at the various professional codes of practice that are there, and it sounds like they've taken the best elements of those and outlined high-level principles that a new overarching code should incorporate. The recommendation is for a single set of principles for all agents to adhere to, with provisions specific to each discipline. You know, and this should ensure that agents understand the expectations, and it also allows clear criteria for breaches. Okay, so I hope all of this is understandable and yeah, encouraging news for you. It certainly is for me. So we know where the responsibility lies, but do all the staff need to be qualified? Now, the recommendations of the working group are really along the lines of a list of reserved activities, which has been created, and these can only be performed by a licensed individual at a regulated firm. And they've got a list of suggested activities on this reserved list. So, you know, we'll see if this is added to. I'm sure it will be, and adapted. But really, this is the current list that we have. So those that are conducting viewings, market appraisals, negotiating with and on behalf of clients, you know, signing of contracts, those who are providing direct advice to clients, instructing contractors to undertake works, collecting or handling client money, and having responsibility for the health and safety compliance of a property. So licensed individuals need to meet the applicable licensing and qualification criteria to perform these reserved activities. Now, with many companies, not everybody falls into these categories. So what about administrational staff and people that work in the background? Those that are carrying out purely administrative work and not interacting or offering a service to customers as such, don't require professional qualification, okay? One other thing that I hope that regulation will bring to the industry is that of, you know, trainees and apprentices perhaps who are working towards level 3 qualifications, and would it make our industry more attractive? And I think what the group are saying is that, yeah, you can have trainee staff, you can have apprentices who are undertaking their learning and developing their skills, as long as they're supervised by a fully qualified member of staff. And I think what I've heard is that there's a sort of 2-year period from starting in the industry to obtaining this level 3 qualification. So with any luck, by raising professional standards and I hope increasing respect for property agents and the work that we do and our industry in general, that might encourage more people to enter the industry, and hopefully a higher caliber of candidate could be found, and that would be marvelous. I really enjoy that. So in terms of current qualifications, so at the moment there are a lot of agents that do hold a qualification at this level 3 or at a higher level than these proposals. So the regulator will need to set a syllabus that accepts qualifications, and what the level is, where that line is drawn. So, but until the regulator sets the syllabus, no qualification can be marketed as a fully compliant qualification at the moment. However, what the group have said is that where an individual holds an existing qualification below the specified level, they will be allowed to make up any difference between that and the required standard. So it's not a case of really going straight back to day one of your letting school. You can use what you already have and just develop that further, which is good news. Something that, again, RoPA and Arla Property Mark have said is that those who are already in possession of established off-qual regulated level 3 qualifications will have a head start and be ahead of the game. Now, off-qual is the Office of Qualifications and Examinations Regulation. So yeah, it's looking pretty good in terms of how agents will be educated, the level to which they would have to work to, and yeah, the service that comes off the back of that. Now, there is quite a bit of learning to do. I know what the team do and what they have to understand, and the big folder of revision material and study material that they have for these exams. And but really what the working group want to do is really, they don't want the industry to have to bear excessive costs, not only financial, but in the context of maybe depleted stock, market uncertainty, and really a wave of legislation, not least the tenant fee ban that we experienced last year, and things like that. So whilst the recommendations are for substantial changes, it's essential that the government does allow us sufficient lead-in time to give, I guess, thousands of staff who are all trained at varying levels the time that they need to pass qualifications. And as long as the regulator ensures that the syllabus is relevant to practice, even experienced estate agents, I hope, would have no issue and limited expense in achieving the necessary qualification. So let's have a look at RoPA, because amongst many recommendations, there's sort of, let's say, 5 main recommendations that have already been put out there to the industry. So, residential agencies, all agencies operating a residential property business should be licensed, and licensing should include a fit and proper person test for company directors. Secondly, all staff delivering reserved activities that we've looked at, employed within the residential agency business, should be licensed and adhere to a code of practice. All staff delivering the reserved activities employed within the business should hold that level 3 qualification. Company directors and managing agents should hold a level 4 qualification. And obviously, regarding compliance, a new regulator is to be appointed to oversee compliance with an overarching code of practice. So obviously, I think there were 53 items of recommendation in the report, which will all be looked at, but these ones are just the general sort of overall subjects that I think are most important for us. So what are we doing at James Anderson? So let's have a little look. So now there's a fine looking bunch there, apart from the chap at the top. I'm not sure who he is. But you can see we've got our managers, Rory, Oliver and Lee. Phoebe is our assistant manager, and we've got Will as a senior manager, senior negotiator. And we have Sheridan and Alex as negotiators there, and also Lorianne there just at the bottom. Of course, that's not everybody. We have a far larger team than that, but this is just to sort of give you an idea of who we are and how we are qualified. So we at James Anderson have been ALA Property Mark members for quite a while now, at least 15 years. So we train our staff. They have a framework in which they work towards, and they're legally compliant. They're up to date with legislation, which I hope is all reassuring for landlords. So when people first start and they're trainees, they are closely supervised by level 3 qualified staff. Now, what we do embark on is a examination and training process that's provided by the Guild of Estate Agents. The Guild of Estate Agents is approved by national trading standards. And we are one of a few agents in our area that are approved by trading standards, which is a great accolade to have. And within the first 12 months of their employment, we fully expect the training staff to complete this. Often they complete it within the first few months. And there are other criteria, of course, for them in order to progress to negotiator status. So once a member of staff is a negotiator, at that point, they embark upon their level 3 qualifications. And there are 4 units that they have to study. So it does take a little while, But we believe that they can all do this within 12 months. And there are several other responsibilities that they take on as negotiators. So along with qualification and also meeting the other criteria that we set as an employer, they may then progress to a senior negotiator, or perhaps, then later on to a branch manager. But at this stage, they will be level 3 qualified, and the managers are level 3 qualified, which, is great news. I'm very, very happy with that, because, when everything does kick in with RoPA, I know that my team will be ahead of the game. And again, don't forget, directors level 3 or 4 is the recommendation. Okay. In addition to this, in terms of that continued professional development that's been mentioned a couple of times in the earlier slides, although the industry says that level 3 is equivalent to an A level, there's onward learning, and you have to demonstrate that in order to keep your qualification. Because to be honest with you, the only bit I don't agree with on the A level label is I did a variety of subjects at A level, one of which was biology. I really enjoyed it. It's a great subject, but I haven't looked at it since I left school. So in terms of comparing it to an A level, personally, I think there's a lot more work that goes into this. Once your exams are finished and you're certified, it's that continued learning that needs to carry on. And you have to look at all the changes that take place in our industry. If you don't keep up with it, then you might as well not bother. As far as I'm concerned, that might sound a bit tough, but that's how I look at it. In my eyes, compliance, legislation, whatever it might be, is very black and white. It is or it isn't. Okay, so the code of practice that was issued, this was issued earlier this month. I think it was maybe 20th or 22nd of July. And the main points in this really are here as follows. So the overarching code requires that the agent must be a fit and proper person, must ensure that all staff have been given proper instructions and training about complying with relevant laws and the requirements of this code applicable to their role. They must ensure that all staff are trained to deal with consumers and colleagues in a manner that encourage respect, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And of course, this has come from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. We must ensure that staff are qualified to the levels specified by the regulator, trained and hold the appropriate license where applicable to undertake the responsibilities delegated to them. And then finally, the agent must maintain documentary evidence showing the training provided to all staff and individuals' ongoing training required to meet the relevant continuing professional development requirements. That's the CPD that we mentioned. So we are nearly there, but again, there's been a little development on this as well in the recent week. So just to let you know exactly where we are at the moment with this, we do have the code of practice, which is there for comment at the moment. It's been provided in the public, and we have until the 4th of September to make comment on that. And then obviously those comments will be reviewed and we'll move on to the next step. But I think it was last week that this lady here, Karen Smythe, she is the MP for Bristol South, and she asked the Housing Minister, when will the government bring forward legislative proposals to establish an independent regulator? And the chap that answered her was this guy here, Christopher Pincher. And this is what he said, and I'll just read this to you. The government remains committed to raising professionalism and standards amongst property agents and is grateful for the final report of the Independent Regulation of Property Agents Working Group, chaired by Lord Best. We welcome the recent appointment of Baroness Hayter of Kentish Town, there she is, as chair of a new independent steering group on codes of practice for property agents as an important development towards ensuring all customers are treated fairly and all agents work to the same high standards. Though our collective efforts are currently focused on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we will respond to the report of Lord Best's working group setting out the next steps, following careful consideration of its 53 recommendations, and we will consider any code produced by Baroness Hayter's steering group in due course. So there is some momentum there. Yes, there are some distractions, but obviously this is rolling forward, and there is definitely going to be more to come. So I can certainly keep you updated on that, but I hope that what you've seen is what we can expect, what's coming up, and where we are as a company. And I'm quite proud of my team, as always, that they are qualified, and we're working towards qualification with our trainees, and we will make sure that we are ahead of the game, because, you know, if you can't commit to your industry and your chosen profession, you know, it doesn't make sense to me. Do the things that you do 100% and give it your best shot. You know, and that's how I want my team to operate as well. So that's the end of the slides for you. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and it's been enlightening, and it's answered, I guess, for a few of you, that question of regulation. And there are some other questions that have sort of occurred to me in all of this, which, you know, we have a team of part-time workers and people who help us with viewings, certainly at the weekends and in the evenings. And I get the feeling that they are probably going to have to be level 3 qualified as well, even though they are part-time, in terms of that interaction and face-to-face dealing with customers, providing information. It's just the same as the full-time members of staff. So I imagine that they will have to be qualified as well. And don't let length of service in the industry detract from qualification. Obviously, there are many people who have been in the industry for a number of years, but I don't believe that the regulation of property agents will allow length of service to be a qualification. Regardless of whether you've been in the industry a year or 30 years, I think everybody's going to have to be qualified. So don't let length of service fool you. Qualification is really the only way to ensure that the agents you work with are the right people to be dealing with. And then finally, what about you guys? What about landlords? I'm sure that once agents are regulated, landlords will then be next on the list. So, you know, independent sort of landlords who look after their own properties, their own tenancies, will certainly eventually become regulated, and we'll see if that applies to all landlords. You know, in Wales, landlords need to be registered. So the chances are that's going to happen in the not so distant future. At the moment, I would imagine that RoPA will probably, I guess, maybe 2022 or something along those lines, will have the final report and we'll know what agents have to do. But I can't imagine there'll be much for landlords until after that. So don't worry, don't have any sleepless nights. But if you have any questions, you can always ask, okay? So our next webinar is going to be on Thursday, the 27th of August. And what I'll be doing going forward is bringing you some general industry updates, a little bit of news and some stories that have happened over the last month or so. And obviously where we have anything significant in terms of legislative updates, changes, more RoPA information, I will include those in the webinars. And if necessary and the topic is big enough, we'll do more specific focus webinars. But hopefully the next time we see each other, I'll have a few little bite-sized bits of information and updates for you. So as always, look after yourselves, and if you have any queries or questions, you're very welcome to get in contact with me or your team at the appropriate offices. So yeah, please do go and enjoy your Thursdays. We're blessed with some glorious sunshine again, and I hope you've got something nice planned for your weekends. Anyway, I will leave you to it. Thank you very much, and I will see you all soon. Many thanks, everybody. Bye.